The meeting room on Council Station 7 was quiet. Too quiet. Ambassador James Okonkwo sat at the long table and looked at the faces around him. 47 species were represented here. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of crystal. But they all had one thing in common. They all thought humans were weak. James had been Earth's chief diplomat for 12 years now. He had watched humans bow and scrape and follow every single rule the Galactic Council demanded. It was called the Courtesy Protocol. Earth's leaders created it after first contact 42 years ago. The idea was simple. Show the galaxy that humans could be civilized. Show them that Earth deserved its place among the stars. The problem was that courtesy looked like weakness to species who had never faced real danger. The galaxy had been at peace for 10,000 years. Wars still happened, but they were nothing like the wars humans remembered. Galactic wars were rituals. Two fleets would meet in space. They would exchange fire until a predetermined number of ships were destroyed. Then someone would surrender. Civilians were never touched. Cities were never bombed. It was all very polite and very regulated. Humans found this strange. In Earth's history, war meant total commitment. It meant factory workers building weapons day and night. It meant entire populations focused on one goal, survival. But James understood why Earth followed these rules. Humans were new here. They had to prove they belonged. Across the table, the Zarathian representative stood up. His name was Khazrath, and he was 7 feet tall with dark green scales and yellow eyes. The Zarathians were one of the most powerful species in the Council. They controlled 50 star systems and had the third largest fleet. Khazrath smiled, showing his sharp teeth. James knew that smile. It was the smile of someone who thought they had already won. The Zarathian spoke in a deep voice that echoed through the chamber. His words were translated instantly by the station's computers. He said that Earth owed the Zarathian hegemony reparations. There had been a trade dispute 3 months ago. A human merchant ship had entered Zarathian space without proper documentation. The ship had been impounded and its crew arrested. Earth had apologized and paid a fine, but apparently that was not enough. Khazrath declared that Earth must cede 5 of its outer colonies as additional compensation. 5 colonies meant 5 million human settlers. These were families who had left Earth to build new lives on distant worlds. They had farms and factories and schools. They had children who had never seen Earth. James felt his stomach tighten. This was not about the trade dispute. This was about power. The Zarathians wanted to take human territory to show the galaxy that they could. They wanted to remind everyone who was strong and who was weak. He stood up slowly. Every eye in the room turned to him. James cleared his throat and spoke in a calm voice. He explained that Earth had already resolved the trade dispute according to Council law. He pointed out that the Zarathian demands violated the Territorial Protection Act, which guaranteed every species the right to its recognized colonies. Khazrath laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. He said that the Territorial Protection Act only applied to civilized species who could defend their territory. He said that if Earth wanted to keep its colonies, it should prove it could defend them. He was challenging Earth to a protocol war. The other representatives started talking among themselves. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked amused. They had seen this before. A strong species would challenge a weak one. The weak one would fight back according to the rules, lose gracefully, and give up what was demanded. That was how the galaxy worked. James knew he had one chance. He needed to make them understand what they were doing. He needed to warn them. He took a deep breath and spoke again. His voice was quiet but clear. He said that Earth had followed the courtesy protocol for 42 years. Humanity had learned the rules. They had fought galactic-style wars and lost gracefully when the rules said they should lose. But this was different. This was not about honor or protocols. This was about taking human homes and human families. If the Zarathians pushed forward with this, they would not face courtesy. They would face something else. He looked directly at Khazrath. He said very carefully that the Zarathians did not want to see what humans were capable of when courtesy ended. He said that Earth was asking one final time for this matter to be resolved through negotiation. The room was silent for a moment. Then Khazrath laughed again. Several other representatives joined him. One of them, a floating jellyfish-like creature from the Methane Collective, made a bubbling sound that the translator rendered as giggling. Khazrath said that Earth's threats were empty. He said humans had proven over 4 decades that they were sheep dressed up as wolves. He formally rejected Earth's appeal. He declared that Zarathian fleets would move to blockade the 5 contested colonies in 72 hours. If Earth surrendered the colonies peacefully, the settlers would be allowed to leave with their possessions. If Earth resisted, the Zarathians would follow protocol engagement rules and teach the humans a lesson about their place in the galaxy. James sat down. His hands were shaking, but he kept them under the table where no one could see. He had tried. He had given them a chance. Now he had to send a message to Earth. The message was simple. The courtesy protocol had failed. That night, James stood in his quarters and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there was humanity's true strength, locked away behind diplomatic agreements and self-imposed restrictions. He wondered what the galaxy would look like in a month. He wondered if the Zarathians would still be laughing. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen received the message. She was 70 years old with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had fought in the last wars before first contact, back when humans fought each other. She remembered what real war looked like. She had spent 40 years teaching Earth's military to fight like the galaxy expected. She had watched young officers learn to follow protocols that made no sense to human strategic thinking. Now she stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva. Around her, holographic displays showed the positions of every human ship in space, the defensive fleets near the colonies, the patrol routes, the carefully calculated responses that followed galactic rules. She read the message from Ambassador Okonkwo 3 times. Then she turned to her staff and gave a single order. Activate the emergency protocols. Contact the World Assembly. It was time to vote on whether humanity would continue being polite. The vote took 6 hours. Representatives from every nation on Earth participated. They saw the recordings from the council meeting. They heard Kazrat's laughter. They understood what was at stake. 5 million people, 5 colonies, human pride. When the vote finished, the results were clear. 94% in favor. The courtesy protocol was hereby discontinued. Earth's military was authorized to respond to the Zarathian threat with any and all necessary measures. Admiral Chen felt something she had not felt in 40 years. It was not happiness. It was not excitement. It was recognition. She recognized the feeling of restraints being lifted. She recognized the cold clarity that came with knowing that victory was the only acceptable outcome. She walked to a secure vault in the deepest part of the facility. Her handprint and retinal scan opened the door. Inside were files that had not been touched in 4 decades. Strategic doctrines, weapon specifications, tactical manuals, all the knowledge from Earth's bloody history, preserved and waiting. The files had names that would mean nothing to the Zarathians. Totalwa, unrestricted submarine warfare, strategic bombing, scorched Earth, asymmetric warfare. These were concepts the galaxy had forgotten, if they had ever known them at all. Admiral Chen selected several files and transferred them to her personal computer. Then she returned to the war room and began issuing orders. The Zarathians wanted war. They would get war, just not the kind they were expecting. The Zarathian fleet arrived at New Perth exactly 72 hours after the ultimatum. 12 warships, each one a kilometer long, took up positions in orbit around the colony world. The lead ship, commanded by Fleet Master Vorgash, broadcast a message to the surface. The message was simple. The humans had 24 hours to begin evacuation. If they refused, the Zarathians would commence protocol bombardment. That meant precision strikes on military targets and infrastructure. Enough to cripple resistance, but not enough to kill civilians. It was all very civilized according to galactic standards. Vorgash was confident. He had fought in 17 protocol wars. He had never lost. The humans had only 3 defense ships in orbit around New Perth. Small vessels, barely worthy of being called warships. They would engage according to the rules, fire their weapons until the prescribed damage threshold was reached, then surrender. It would all be over in a day. What Vorgash did not know was that those 3 ships had just received new orders. Orders that came directly from Admiral Chen and bore the authorization code that released them from all previous restrictions. The captains of those ships read their orders twice to make sure they understood. Then they began to prepare. On Earth, the World Assembly held an emergency session. Every news channel showed the same images. Zarathian warships in orbit above a human world, 5 million people waiting to see if they would have to abandon their homes. The mood on Earth was dark and angry. People remembered the laughter in the council chamber. They remembered being called sheep dressed as wolves. Admiral Chen appeared on every screen worldwide. She spoke for 10 minutes. She explained that humanity had tried peace. They had tried diplomacy. They had followed every rule the galaxy demanded. But the Zarathians had rejected peace. They had rejected diplomacy. They had demanded human worlds. She said that effective immediately, Earth's military would no longer operate under the courtesy protocol. They would no longer limit themselves to galactic rules of engagement. The Zarathians wanted to see what humans could do. Now they would learn. Her final words became famous. She looked directly into the camera and said that humanity had given the galaxy courtesy for 42 years. The galaxy had mistaken that courtesy for weakness. That mistake would now be corrected. The Zarathians wanted war. They would get war, real war. Human war. The broadcast ended. Within minutes, social media exploded. Some people were afraid. Some were angry. Some were excited. Everyone understood that something fundamental had changed. Humanity was about to show the galaxy what it really was. Above New Perth, the 24-hour deadline expired. Vorgash ordered his ships to begin bombardment. Following protocol, they targeted the 3 human defense ships first. 12 Zarathian vessels against 3 human ones. It should have been a massacre. The human ships did not move into formation. They did not hail the Zarathians to confirm engagement rules. They did not do anything the Zarathian commander expected. Instead, they scattered. Each ship went in a different direction at full speed, launching hundreds of small objects as they fled. Vorgash was confused. Running away was not protocol. Neither was launching what appeared to be mines throughout the orbital space. And why were the human ships broadcasting false surrender signals while still moving? This was not how civilized warfare worked. His confusion turned to alarm when his sensors officer reported something impossible. The mines were not mines. They were autonomous weapons platforms, and they were activating. Hundreds of them. Each one small enough to avoid the ship's main sensors but large enough to carry a missile. The platforms began firing. Not at the Zarathian ship's armored hulls. That would be wasteful. Instead, they targeted sensors, communications arrays, and weapons mounts. Precision strikes that crippled capability without destroying the ships. It was tactical, efficient, and completely outside protocol. Vorgash tried to respond, but his communications were jammed. He tried to coordinate his fleet, but 3 of his ships were reporting total sensor failure. He tried to return fire, but the human platforms were too small and too numerous. For every one his ships destroyed, 3 more appeared from different angles. Then the human ships came back. But they did not come in formation. They came from 3 different directions, firing as they moved. They did not target center mass like protocol demanded. They targeted engines. They targeted life support. They targeted the command deck of Vorgash's flagship with such precision that he wondered if they had somehow obtained the ship's blueprints. Within an hour, the Zarathian fleet was crippled. Not destroyed. That was the terrifying part. The humans could have destroyed them. Instead, they had systematically dismantled the fleet's ability to fight. 6 ships were drifting without power. 4 more had lost all weapons. 2 were trying to retreat but found their navigation systems compromised. Vorgash sat in his command chair and tried to understand what had happened. He had lost before. Every commander lost sometimes. But he had never lost like this. He had never felt so completely outmaneuvered. The humans had not followed a single protocol rule, and it had worked perfectly. Then his communication system crackled to life. Someone had bypassed the jamming. A human voice spoke in perfect Zarathian. The voice was calm and cold. It identified itself as Captain Maria Santos of the Earth Defense Ship Trafalgar. Captain Santos said that the Zarathian fleet was defeated. She said they could surrender now and be treated according to the proper conventions, or they could continue fighting and be destroyed. She gave them 5 minutes to decide. Vorgash wanted to refuse. He wanted to fight. But he looked at his tactical display and knew the truth. His fleet was finished. In a fair fight following protocol rules, his 12 ships should have crushed 3 human vessels. Instead, those 3 vessels had torn his fleet apart without following any rules at all. He surrendered. It was the most humiliating moment of his life, but it was also the moment he realized that humans were not what the galaxy thought they were. News of the battle reached the Galactic Council within hours. The initial reports were confused. Some said the humans had won. Some said the Zarathians had been ambushed. Some said the whole thing was a mistake. But as more information came in, the truth became clear. 3 human ships had defeated 12 Zarathian warships using tactics the galaxy had never seen. Ambassador Okonkwo was called before the council. Representatives from 24 species demanded an explanation. They said the humans had violated protocol. They said the battle was invalid. They said this was not how civilized species fought wars. James stood before them and felt no fear. He had warned them. He had given them a chance. They had laughed. Now he spoke in a calm, clear voice that carried through the chamber. He said that Earth had followed the courtesy protocol for 42 years. During that time, humans had learned galactic customs. They had learned protocol warfare. They had learned to fight like the rest of the galaxy. But the Zarathians had rejected courtesy. They had demanded human worlds and human lives. So humanity had responded the only way that made sense. He reminded the council that Earth had never signed the Protocol Warfare Convention. Humans had chosen to follow it voluntarily as a sign of good faith. But when that good faith was spat upon, the choice to follow it ended. One of the representatives, a crystalline being from the Lumina Confederation, asked what the humans had done that was so different. How had 3 ships beaten 12? James smiled for the first time since the crisis began. He said that humans had done nothing special. They had simply fought to win instead of fighting to follow rules. They had used deception, misdirection, and overwhelming focused force on weak points. They had fought smart instead of fighting fair. The council chamber erupted in arguments. Some species wanted to sanction Earth. Others wanted to understand these new tactics. A few wanted to ally with humanity immediately. But underneath all the noise, there was a new feeling: fear. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had fought wars where everyone knew the rules. Wars where you could calculate the outcome before the first shot was fired. Wars where losing meant giving up something but never meant extinction. The humans had just shown them that there was another way to fight. A way where rules did not matter. A way where the only goal was victory. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched the news feeds from the council meeting. She saw the fear in their faces. She saw them beginning to understand. But she also knew this was just the beginning. The Zarathians would not accept defeat after losing one battle. They would escalate. They would bring their full fleet to bear. They would try to crush humanity through sheer numbers. She was counting on it. Because every ship the Zarathians sent would be another lesson. Another demonstration of what humans could do when they stopped being polite. Another step toward making the galaxy understand that Earth's courtesy had never been weakness. It had been a gift. And that gift was now revoked. Admiral Chen opened a secure channel to Fleet Command. She gave the order to begin the next phase. Humanity had shown the galaxy they could win a battle. Now it was time to show them what happened when humans fought a war. The Zarathian High Command was not pleased with Fleet Master Vorgash's report. 12 ships defeated by 3. It was impossible. It was embarrassing. It was unacceptable. They stripped Vorgash of his rank and ordered him to return home in disgrace. Then they assembled a real fleet, 150 warships, enough to crush any resistance. But before that fleet could launch, something strange happened. The Zarathian military command network crashed. Every computer system in the hegemony's military infrastructure went dark for exactly 17 minutes. When the systems came back online, things were different. Supply orders had been changed. Ship assignments had been scrambled. Classified information was no longer classified. The Zarathian cybersecurity teams investigated. They found traces of intrusion. Someone had broken into their most secure systems. Someone with technology far beyond what they thought humans possessed. The intrusion had been sophisticated, precise, and completely invisible until it was too late. It took the Zarathians 3 days to sort out the chaos. 3 days when their military was essentially blind. 3 days when Admiral Chen's forces moved into position. When the Zarathian fleet finally launched, they found themselves facing something unexpected. The humans had not waited in defensive positions. They had not fortified their colonies and prepared for a siege. Instead, human ships were already in Zarathian space. Small, fast vessels that appeared, struck, and vanished before the Zarathians could respond. These were not battles. They were raids. Human ships would appear near a Zarathian supply depot, destroy it, and disappear. They would ambush cargo vessels carrying weapons and equipment. They would hack into station computers and steal information. They were fighting like pirates, not like a proper military. The Zarathian admirals were furious. This was not honorable warfare. This was guerrilla tactics. This was terrorism. They demanded that the Galactic Council condemn Earth's actions. They wanted sanctions. They wanted other species to help restore order. Ambassador Okonkwo listened to their complaints with a calm face. When they finished, he asked a simple question. Had the Zarathians expected humanity to line up their ships in neat rows and wait to be destroyed? Had they expected humans to fight fair when they were outnumbered 50-1? He explained that what the Zarathians called terrorism, humans called asymmetric warfare. When one side had more ships, the other side adapted. They used speed instead of strength. They used intelligence instead of numbers. They targeted logistics and morale instead of just military forces. This was how wars were won when you were the underdog. The council was divided. Some species agreed with the Zarathians. Others were fascinated by these human tactics. A few quietly started studying Earth's military history. They were discovering that humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other. Every dirty trick, every clever strategy, every brutal method had been tried, tested, and refined. While the council debated, the war continued. The Zarathian fleet tried to corner the human raiders, but they could never catch them. The humans seemed to know where the Zarathians would be, before the Zarathians knew themselves. It was as if the humans could read minds. They could not read minds, but they could read communications. Human cyber warfare teams had completely penetrated Zarathian military networks. Every order, every plan, every movement was known to Earth's command before it was executed. Admiral Chen could see the entire Zarathian fleet on her displays in real time. She knew where they were going, and what they planned to do. It was not fair. But as Admiral Chen liked to remind her staff, fair was a word that meant nothing in real war. In real war, you used every advantage. You exploited every weakness. You did whatever it took to win. The Zarathians decided to change tactics. If they could not catch the human raiders, they would attack human infrastructure. They sent their fleet to strike at the orbital stations around Earth's colonies. They would force the humans to defend fixed positions. Then the Zarathians could use their superior numbers to win. The fleet arrived at the colony of New Johannesburg expecting to find a space station and a few defense ships. Instead, they found a trap. The station was there, but so were 50 human vessels hiding in the shadow of the planet's largest moon, and the station itself was armed with weapons the Zarathians had never seen before. What happened next became known as the Battle of New Johannesburg. It was not the largest battle in the war. It was not even the bloodiest. But it was the battle where the galaxy truly understood what human warfare meant. The Zarathian fleet was lured into a kill zone. The station opened fire with railguns that accelerated projectiles to a fraction of light speed. The human ships emerged from hiding and attacked from 6 different directions simultaneously. And then something truly terrifying happened. The humans released autonomous attack drones, thousands of them. Each one was programmed with one mission: find a Zarathian ship and destroy its engines. The drones moved in coordinated swarms, overwhelming the Zarathian point defenses. Ships that had survived for 3,000 years were crippled in minutes. The Zarathian commander tried to retreat, but retreat required working engines. Half his fleet was dead in space. The other half was scattered and disorganized. Human ships moved through the chaos like sharks through a school of fish, picking off isolated vessels. Then the psychological warfare began. Human ships broadcast messages on all Zarathian frequencies. The messages showed videos of destroyed Zarathian vessels. They showed interviews with captured Zarathian officers who described the overwhelming power of human weapons. They showed maps of Zarathian territory with targets marked. They promised that every Zarathian military base, every shipyard, every fortress would be destroyed. It was propaganda. But it was effective propaganda. Zarathian crews started to fear humans. They started to believe the humans were invincible. Some ships refused orders to engage. Others surrendered at the first sign of human vessels. The psychological collapse spread faster than any physical defeat. Back on the Zarathian homeworld, the High Command was in chaos. They had sent their best fleets. They had committed everything to crushing the humans, and they were losing, badly, publicly, humiliatingly. Some advocated for escalation. They wanted to use forbidden weapons. They wanted to bombard human worlds from afar. They wanted to break the rules even more than the humans had broken them. But the moderates pointed out something important. If the Zarathians escalated, the humans would escalate further, and nobody knew what weapons humans were keeping in reserve. Then Earth released a statement that made everyone in the galaxy stop and think. Admiral Chen herself appeared in a broadcast that was transmitted to every major world. She spoke for 5 minutes. She explained that humanity had been using approximately 30% of its available military capacity. She said that Earth had hundreds of weapons systems that had not yet been deployed. She listed some of them by name. Kinetic bombardment, biological warfare, nanomachine swarms, strategic AI weapons. She said that humanity preferred not to use these weapons. They were terrible. They were weapons designed for total war, for conflicts where extinction was the alternative to victory. But if the Zarathians continued to escalate, if they refused to accept a reasonable peace, then Earth would have no choice. The broadcast ended with a simple message. Humanity was offering peace, fair terms. The Zarathians would withdraw from all disputed territory. They would pay reparations for the damages caused. In return, Earth would cease all offensive operations. The war would end. Both sides would survive, or the Zarathians could continue fighting. They could discover exactly what human weapons could do when humans were fighting for their survival. The choice was theirs. In the Zarathian High Command Chamber, the debate lasted for hours. Pride demanded they continue. Logic demanded they surrender. In the end, logic won. The Zarathians had learned something the galaxy had forgotten over 10,000 years of ritualized warfare. Some species fought to win territory. Other species fought to survive. You did not want to fight the species that was fighting to survive. The Zarathian government sent a formal surrender. They agreed to all of Earth's terms. They would withdraw. They would pay reparations. They would acknowledge that they had underestimated humanity. The war was over. Earth had won, but Admiral Chen knew this was just the beginning. The Zarathians had surrendered, but the rest of the galaxy was watching. Some species were terrified. Others were curious. A few were already making plans. Earth had proven it could win a war. Now it had to prove it could win the peace. The surrender documents were signed on Council Station 7. The same chamber where the Zarathians had laughed at Ambassador Okonkwo now hosted the ceremony where they admitted defeat. The contrast was not lost on anyone present, but humanity's terms shocked the galaxy. Instead of demanding territory or tribute in the traditional sense, Earth laid out a different kind of peace. The Zarathians would dismantle most of their fleet. They would keep only enough ships to defend their home system. All offensive weapons would be removed. All military expansion would cease for 50 years. The Zarathians would also pay reparations, but not in money. They would send engineers and workers to rebuild every human structure they had damaged. Zarathian labor would repair what Zarathian weapons had destroyed. It would take years, but humans insisted on this personal form of restitution. Most controversially, Earth demanded that Zarathian officers attend human military academies. They would study human history. They would learn about the world wars, about total war, about what happens when civilizations fight for their existence. The goal was not humiliation. The goal was education. The galaxy needed to understand what it had been playing at for 10,000 years. Finally, Earth established a permanent military base in the Zarathian home system. Not a large base, just enough to serve as a reminder that courtesy was not weakness, a reminder that mercy was a gift, not a given. The Zarathian government accepted all terms. They had no choice. Their fleet was shattered. Their economy was damaged. Their pride was broken. But something interesting happened in the months that followed. As Zarathian workers rebuilt human colonies, as Zarathian officers studied human warfare, understanding began to grow. The Zarathians started to see that humans had not been weak. They had been restrained. There was a difference. Weakness meant you could not hurt your enemy. Restraint meant you chose not to hurt them until you had no other choice. The Zarathians had mistaken one for the other, and it had cost them everything. But not everyone in the galaxy was pleased with Earth's victory. 6 species formed what they called a peacekeeping coalition. They claimed to be concerned about the precedent Earth was setting. They said that allowing humans to fight without following protocols would destabilize the entire galactic order. They demanded that Earth return to civilized rules of warfare. What they really meant was that they were afraid. They had seen what humans could do. They had seen the tactics, the weapons, the ruthless efficiency. They wanted to put those capabilities back in a box before humans turned their attention elsewhere. The coalition assembled a fleet, 1,200 vessels from 6 different species. It was an impressive show of force. They positioned this fleet in neutral space between Earth and Zarathian territory. The message was clear. Stand down. Accept galactic authority. Return to the old ways. Admiral Chen was in her office when the reports came in. She studied the tactical displays for a long time. 1,200 ships. Against them, Earth had perhaps 300 vessels in the region. On paper, it looked like Earth was outnumbered 4-1. She ordered the fleet to full readiness but not to engage. Then she sent a message to the coalition. It was brief. She said that peacekeepers were welcome in the region. Anyone who came in peace would be treated with respect, but anyone who came with hostile intent would be treated as an enemy. The coalition had 24 hours to clarify their intentions. The coalition leadership debated. Some wanted to press forward. Others urged caution. They had all seen what happened to the Zarathians, but surely 1,200 ships were enough to overwhelm 300. Surely sheer numbers would prevail. Earth's response to the coalition's posturing came not from the military, but from the civilian government. The Secretary General of Earth appeared in a galactic broadcast. She spoke calmly and clearly. She reminded the galaxy that humans had used only a small fraction of their military capability against the Zarathians. She said that Earth had been fighting with one hand, not two. Then she showed them what two hands looked like. She authorized the release of classified information about Earth's home fleet, the fleet that had never left the Sol system. The fleet that the galaxy did not know existed. The numbers were staggering. Earth had 2,000 warships in home defense, not small patrol craft, not outdated vessels. Modern, powerful ships equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity could build. Ships that had been constructed in secret over 4 decades while Earth played the role of weak newcomer. There were weapons platforms throughout the asteroid belt. There were hidden bases on moons throughout the outer solar system. There were automated defense systems that could track and destroy thousands of targets simultaneously. Earth's home system was not a colony. It was a fortress, and beyond the numbers there were the weapons themselves. The Secretary General authorized a demonstration. A single human vessel traveled to an uninhabited asteroid field near Coalition space. The ship fired one weapon. Just one. It was a kinetic weapon. A projectile accelerated to 90% of light speed, using technologies the galaxy had never seen. When it hit the target asteroid, the explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The asteroid, which had been 3 kilometers wide, simply ceased to exist. It was turned into plasma and scattered particles. The demonstration ended with a simple statement. Earth had hundreds of these weapons. They could strike anywhere in the galaxy. They could destroy planets, shatter fleets, or eliminate any target with perfect precision. Humans had chosen not to use them against the Zarathians because the Zarathians had not forced them to. The Zarathians had been smart enough to surrender before humanity had to escalate to total war. The coalition fleet dispersed within 6 hours. The 6 species sent individual messages to Earth. They apologized for the misunderstanding. They assured humanity that they had no hostile intentions. They each requested diplomatic talks to establish better relations with Earth. Within a week, 7 more species applied for formal friendship treaties with Earth. Within a month, 12 species requested human military advisors to help modernize their defense forces. The galaxy was adapting to a new reality. Humanity was not a weak newcomer. Humanity was an apex predator that had been hiding its teeth. The Galactic Council held a special session. They created a new classification for species like humanity. The official term was advanced military civilization. Unofficially, species called them apex predators. The designation came with certain rights. These species were not required to follow protocol warfare conventions. They were permitted to maintain whatever military force they deemed necessary. Other species were advised to approach them with caution and respect. Earth was the first species to receive this designation. The Council made it very clear in their official statement. They acknowledged that humanity had operated under self-imposed restrictions for 42 years. They acknowledged that those restrictions had been mistaken for weakness. They acknowledged that this mistake had led to unnecessary conflict. Ambassador Okonkwo addressed the Council one final time regarding the war. He stood in the same spot where he had warned the Zarathians. He looked at the same faces that had laughed at Earth's concerns. His speech was short and simple. He said that humanity had not wanted war. They had chosen courtesy because they understood the alternative. They had followed galactic rules because they wanted to be good neighbors. But when those rules were used as weapons against them, when courtesy was mistaken for weakness, they had no choice but to respond. He reminded the council that humans had fought themselves for thousands of years. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy had been tested in blood. Humanity had climbed out of that darkness and tried to be better. They had tried to be peaceful, but peace only worked when everyone chose it. When someone chose war, humans remembered how to fight. He ended with a warning that became famous throughout the galaxy. He said that Earth hoped never to fight another war. They hoped that the lesson had been learned. But if anyone ever doubted human capability again, if anyone ever mistook courtesy for weakness again, the response would be swift and total. Humanity would not give a third warning. The chamber was silent when he finished. There was no laughter. There were no mocking smiles. There was only understanding and a healthy measure of fear. The galaxy had learned that the most dangerous species were not the ones who looked fierce. They were the ones who looked peaceful, but remembered how to be savage. 6 months after the war ended, Admiral Sarah Chen retired. She had served Earth for 52 years. She had seen humanity at its worst and at its best. She had commanded fleets in battle and negotiated peace and victory. Now she wanted to rest. Her replacement was Admiral Marcus Webb, a younger officer who had fought in the Zarathian War. He understood the new reality. Earth was no longer the weak newcomer trying to prove itself worthy. Earth was a power, a real power, and with power came responsibility. The galaxy had changed. In Zarathian space, Reconstruction continued. Human and Zarathian workers labored side by side, rebuilding what the war had destroyed. Surprisingly, friendships formed. The Zarathians who worked on human colonies saw how humans lived. They saw the diversity, the creativity, the strange mix of compassion and capability. Young Zarathians began applying to human universities. They wanted to understand these strange beings who had defeated their empire so completely. What they learned changed them. They studied human history and were horrified by the wars humans had fought among themselves. They studied human philosophy and were confused by concepts like forgiveness and redemption. They studied human art and music and found beauty in chaos. Some of these students returned to the Zarathian hegemony and became advocates for reform. They argued that the old ways of thinking about power and warfare were outdated. They said that humans had shown them a better path, not through weakness but through understanding when to be strong and when to be merciful. The Galactic Council underwent changes too. The Protocol Warfare Conventions were revised. The new rules acknowledged that different species had different capabilities. Species like humanity, who possessed advanced military technology and doctrine, were no longer required to fight with one hand tied behind their backs, but they were also held to higher standards regarding civilian protection and proportional response. Earth embraced these new rules. Humanity had never wanted to conquer or dominate. They just wanted respect. They wanted to be left alone to build their colonies and develop their civilization. The galaxy now gave them that respect, born not from fear alone but from understanding. Several species requested human military advisors, not to learn how to wage total war but to learn how to prevent it. Humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. They had also spent centuries learning how to avoid war through deterrence, diplomacy, and mutual understanding. Both lessons were valuable. Ambassador Okonkwo continued his work at the council. He found his job easier now. When he spoke, people listened. When Earth had concerns, they were taken seriously. When humanity made suggestions, other species considered them carefully. It was a better way to operate than being mocked and dismissed. But James understood that this new respect was fragile. It was built on fear as much as admiration. If humanity ever abused its position, if they ever became bullies themselves, the galaxy would turn against them, possibly unite against them. Earth had to prove that their courtesy before the war had been genuine, not strategic. So Earth began the hard work of being a responsible power. They shared some of their technology with other species. Not weapons technology, that would be dangerous, but medical advances, agricultural techniques, manufacturing processes, things that improved lives without threatening security. They also proposed a new institution, the Galactic Defense Initiative. The idea was simple. Species would contribute forces to a common defense fleet. This fleet would respond to genuine threats to galactic security, not internal disputes, not territorial squabbles, but real existential dangers. The proposal was controversial. Some species saw it as a human power grab. Others saw it as a necessary evolution. The debate raged for months, but eventually 32 species signed on. Earth contributed the most ships and technology, but command was shared. Humans would not be in charge. They would be partners. Admiral Webb worked closely with officers from a dozen different species to create the GDI. It was challenging. Every species had different ideas about tactics, strategy, and acceptable casualties. But slowly a common doctrine emerged. It was not purely human. It was not purely galactic either. It was something new. A synthesis of the galaxy's long experience with peace and humanity's hard-won understanding of war. The need for the GDI became apparent sooner than anyone expected. Deep space monitoring stations detected something entering the galaxy from intergalactic space. It was a fleet. A massive fleet of unknown origin, thousands of vessels moving in perfect coordination. The first contact with this new threat was brief and brutal. A patrol from the Crystalline Confederation encountered the unknown fleet. They tried to communicate. The response was weapons fire. The patrol was destroyed in seconds. The message was clear. These newcomers were not interested in talking. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Panic spread quickly. The unknown fleet was heading toward inhabited systems. Their weapons were powerful. Their tactics were aggressive. Some species wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to flee. A few wanted to fight. Ambassador Okonkwo stood and requested recognition. The chamber fell silent. Everyone remembered his last major speech, the one where he had warned the Zarathians. They wondered what humanity would say now. James spoke calmly. He said that the galaxy faced a real threat for the first time in 10,000 years. Not a ritual war, not a political dispute, but an enemy that wanted to destroy them. This was what the Galactic Defense Initiative had been created for. This was why humanity had shared its knowledge of warfare. He said that Earth would commit its full military to the defense of the galaxy. Every ship, every weapon, every resource, but Earth could not do it alone. Humanity had shown what it could do in war. Now the galaxy needed to show what it could do when all species stood together. The speech worked. One by one, species pledged their forces to the common defense. The Zarathians, who had been Earth's enemies months before, committed their rebuilt fleet. The coalition species that had tried to intimidate humanity now requested to serve alongside human vessels. Even the timid species who had never fought contributed what they could. Admiral Webb took command of the defense fleet. It was the largest gathering of military force in galactic history. 200 species, 15,000 vessels, and leading them, providing strategic direction and tactical innovation, were the humans who had spent 42 years pretending to be weak. The unknown enemy reached the outer systems 2 weeks later. The first battle was devastating. The enemy ships were powerful and their weapons were advanced. The galactic forces took heavy losses, but they also learned. They adapted. They started using human tactics, feints, ambushes, coordinated strikes on weak points. Admiral Webb watched the battle unfold from the command center on Earth. He saw ships from species that had been enemies cooperating perfectly. He saw Zarathian vessels protecting human colonies. He saw human ships covering the retreat of Crystal Confederation wounded. He saw the galaxy learning to fight together. The war against the unknown enemy lasted 8 months. It was brutal. Entire systems were evacuated. Billions of civilians were relocated to safe zones. The casualty lists grew long. But the galaxy held. They held because they fought smart. They held because humans had taught them that war was not about honor or protocols. It was about survival. The turning point came when human scientists cracked the enemy's communication protocols. They discovered something surprising. The invaders were not cruel. They were desperate. Their home galaxy had been consumed by a cosmic disaster. They were refugees looking for a new home. They attacked because they thought the galaxy would not share. Earth proposed something radical. Negotiate. The idea was met with resistance. How do you negotiate with someone who had killed millions? But Ambassador Okonkwo pointed out that humans had done worse to each other throughout history. And humans had learned to make peace even after terrible wars. The negotiations were tense. But eventually an agreement was reached. The newcomers, who called themselves the Wanderers, would be given uninhabited systems to colonize. In return, they would share their advanced technology and become part of the galactic community. They would also help rebuild what they had destroyed. It was not perfect. Many species objected. Many would never forgive the deaths. But it was peace. And peace was always better than continued war. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed in fundamental ways. The old divisions faded. Species that had barely spoken before became allies. Trade increased. Cultural exchange flourished. And at the center of it all was humanity, no longer trying to prove they belonged, but helping to build something better. Admiral Webb retired 10 years after the Wanderer War. At his farewell ceremony, representatives from 93 species attended. The Zarathian ambassador spoke on behalf of them all. He said that humanity had taught the galaxy 2 lessons. The first was how to fight when fighting was necessary. The second, and more important, was how to build peace when peace became possible. He said that the galaxy had been fortunate. Fortunate that humans chose courtesy before war. Fortunate that humans showed restraint even in victory. Fortunate that when the real enemy came, humans were there to help them survive.